This is the Weekly Set, the official podcast of TheTotalScreen.com. Episode 194, recorded February 16th, 2019. Hello everybody and welcome to the Weekly Set, the official podcast of The Total Screen. My name is Tyson and I am your host. And I am joined today, as always, by my partner in crime here at The Total Screen, William Rohrig.
Hello.
So today, as usual, we are going to be talking about True Detective Season 3 and The Magicians. So let's start off with True Detective Season 3, Episode 6, Hunters in the Dark. So, got a few little kind of plot points I want to break down here. We got to kind of meet a new character here that seems to be kind of a little bit on the important side here, which is Harris James. He's a former police officer. He worked the case in the 1980s with Wayne and Roland, not directly, but he was one of the kind of beat cops working the case.
Yeah.
And then ended up as the head of security at Hoyt Foods. It's like a big thing and makes a ton of money, and so they got to meet and interview him. This is the character that we'd heard about in previous episodes that had disappeared.
Yeah, this is the character who apparently planted the evidence on the Woodward residence.
Yeah, so that's kind of why they're going to see him, is because he's tied to the finding of the backpack. He says that he's not the one that actually found it, he's the one that identified it.
Right.
Like, another officer found the backpack and then he said, "Hey, isn't that Will's backpack?" So, that's how he clarified it, but they went in to interview him under the suspicion that he's the guy that found the evidence, so he's the most likely if somebody planted it.
And they interview him, and he comes off as a little strange, there's something a little bit off about him, like he mentions donuts, and, Wayne, retorts, he doesn't eat donuts, like shooting back at the obvious cop stereotype, like he retorts, "Oh, I don't eat donuts." And then Harris says something a little weird. He says, yeah, I can tell you got a good body.
Yeah, this is one of a few kind of, I guess, like gay plot lines that were let dangling in this episode.
And you can see Wayne immediately looks uncomfortable at that comment,
Yeah, like it just kind of took him off guard, what?
What? Yeah, exactly.
There's a few of these in this episode. We could just get to that right now. During this episode, we get some hints towards Tom, the father of the two children, perhaps being gay, which, it feels like they dropped it in there to lend credence to the theory that's been brewing that he's not the actual father of his children.
Right. Well, it's interesting because, to give context, I dropped this because early on in the episode, and this is actually building off of what was brewing from a previous episode, because they had him in the interrogation room, and Roland and Wayne kind of come to this idea that he had something to do with Julie's disappearance, that he was molesting her because Wayne found the peephole in Will's closet,
Mm-hmm. Something that they originally thought might be because of Dan.
Yeah, especially because Dan was apparently staying in that room when he was living there for the brief period he was there. So they had originally thought that could have been Dan, but it hadn't really come up much until now. And so they kind of, Roland and Wayne kind of come to this conclusion, and they go in there and they start grilling Tom hard about it, and Tom just seems to be clueless. He doesn't know what they're going on about, And Roland is clearly bothered by all this, more so than Wayne. Wayne sort of, Wayne sort of has his convictions about it, but Roland is conflicted because Roland had gotten to know Tom as a friend. And so Roland So they go and try to find any evidence on Tom, to convict him. That was the first thing. Like, they get the authority to go through his stuff. They go interview, everybody Tom's, had contact with.
His work. That's where it first kind of comes up.
That's where it first kind of comes up. And so they start finding this evidence that, Tom might be gay. And I think that comes up to kind of hammer it home that no, Tom wasn't doing anything with Julie because he's a homosexual. He wouldn't be sexually attracted to his daughter,
They did it. They showed it through when they went to his work and they were talking to his boss, and his boss was saying that there's some animosity between him and some of the other workers because they had, I guess, followed him and saw him coming out of like a gay movie theater or something.
Gay bar.
Or a gay club or bar or something.
Yeah.
And so they were, so they started kind of like railing on him for being gay. And of course, this isn't just teasing so much as like actual harassment.
And this is also the early 80s. This is the height of the AIDS scare when people believed you can get AIDS just by being within proximity of a homosexual.
Mm-hmm.
So, people's prejudice against homosexuals back then was much, much worse than even today.
Yes. It seems like it's not too long ago, but there's a significant difference in the behavior towards homosexuals then than now.
Right.
It's not just a matter of like, oh, why aren't you being accepting? It's like, it's not even teasing or using insensitive words. It's like straight up legitimate harassment.
Yeah, straight up.
And
yeah, exactly.
So that was kind of like the first thing. Then when they were, you mentioned that they were checking his house and stuff when they did that. And they found like a pamphlet in his bed about something about gay conversion therapy.
Well, here's the thing. We know like in the 1990 timeline, Tom cleaned up and he found Jesus, right? He found God, apparently, and in that sense, the pamphlet makes sense because Tom had converted to Christianity, gave himself over to church, and so he obviously went to somebody within the church about his homosexuality, and somebody obviously suggested conversion therapy to him, which is
they found this pamphlet in a drawer though with like a bunch of condoms.
Yeah. So I don't think it. So
which implies a struggle.
Yeah, which implies a struggle. Yeah, it reminds me of like that Mr. Show skit with David Cross, where like David Cross is a homosexual and he goes on like this talk show, the 700 Club show, where like he talks about like how he found Jesus and he's been converted away from Christianity, and then like he's good for a few months and then he goes like to a gay orgy or some shit, and then he goes, okay, yeah, that happened, but I've been cured now, and they do that like several times.
They seem to be implying a struggle with the condoms and the pamphlet. As we already mentioned, there's also that kind of scene where Harris James, the one police officer that is working now as the Hoyt Foods head of security, had commented about Wayne having a nice body or something. Yeah. And that's like the other kind of like weird gay thing that they were putting out there. You can interpret
that as like a homosexual comment, but I think coming from that character, it struck me as like more of like an odd as hell thing to say. Like even for like a gay man, even for like somebody who's homosexual, like to just come out and say that to like a police officer who's like, just asking you questions about a case.
To me, it felt almost like homophobic writing. That's kind of like the thing I said. Not that the characters are being homophobic, but that the actual writing of the show has like this weird traced line of homophobia in it.
Yeah,
that kind of made me feel uncomfortable, but not like in a way of like the show itself. Not like the show did something that made me feel uncomfortable. More like it feels like there's something behind the scenes of the show that's making me a little uncomfortable.
I just think that dialogue and like the manner in which like that character Harris like carried himself. So I just felt like an odd vibe from this character of Harris. Even like aside from like that one thing he said, which was weird, like the whole way he carried himself, I just got like odd vibes from that character. And I think
you got like a human suit vibe from him.
Yeah, he's just a weird dude. Okay. Yeah. So So that's my take on Harris. I don't know if the writing is like homophobic or anything like you said, but
I'm not saying it is for sure. It felt so weird and out of place, but not like it almost felt like not necessarily intentional, like almost like they're trying to imply like, oh, we're giving you a hint towards homosexuality and we're doing that to imply that there's something wrong with this character. And that's kind of what struck me as like, oh, like, where is this going? You know, like, what is he doing with this? Is this something that's going to kind of pan out into the actual story itself, or is this something that's just kind of showing some kind of a bias from the writer, you know?
Right.
So it made me a little uncomfortable, but I'm not saying for sure that that's like, you know, this is indefensible. The creator of the show, Nick whatever, he's clearly a homophobe, you know?
Nick Pizza Man.
Yeah, Nick Pizza is clearly a homophobe, and we should all just turn our backs on everything he does. Like, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that, like, something struck me as a little uncomfortable in the way that was presented. It felt not necessarily as part of the show, but I
think the intention is that character is supposed to strike you as uncomfortable. So maybe that's what you felt.
Maybe, but I don't know. Like, it felt a little off to me. Like, cause it wasn't just that. It was that this was like the episode where it's like, okay, we're going to bring up all the gay stuff in this episode.
That's true.
and it just kind of like, you know, came all together, and that made it feel like a little weird to me.
Yeah. You got a good point. Yeah.
I mean, we'll have to see where it goes. There's only 2 episodes left, so we should get some resolution.
Yeah, we should get some resolutions going on.
We got, in this episode, we finally learned about the peephole. You had mentioned the peephole, when we were talking about, Tom's alleged homosexuality, but there's also just the mystery of where that peephole came from. We actually got a resolution on it, and it's not even a peephole.
Oh yeah, right. They were passing, notes back and forth.
This is something that Wayne realized after he had the fight with Roland where he got out of the car. When we didn't mention this yet, but basically after they were doing some investigating, Wayne realized that Roland was driving him home and then he got all offended. He was all like, no, we're staying on the job. And he's like, no, we're not. If you don't want to go home.
Well, they got into a fight because, Roland wanted to clear Tom, and it became very clear that Wayne, you know, Roland wanted to just go ahead and say Tom is clear, and Wayne didn't want to let go of it. He wanted to investigate Tom further, do all this, and Roland was kind of like, you know, being defiant, being like, no, we're not. I'm taking you home.
Well, this was like, it didn't happen like I'm taking you home. It happened like,
well, he didn't say that.
Wayne realized that he was driving him home.
Yeah. Well, yeah, Roland didn't literally say that. But,
and then Wayne got offended at the prospect of being home. And then Roland implied, hey, you know, if you don't want to go home, then that's on you. But that's fine. I'll drop you off wherever. But don't say that it's the job is why you're not being able to go home. And then this started up a whole kind of argument between them, ended up going back into the whole, like, you know, why did Roland get promoted while Wayne didn't, you know, subject again? Wayne got pissed and was like, pull over, I'm getting out. He gets out. And he's kind of just walking home on his own, but he stops and goes into the abandoned house of the Purcells, and it's all graffitied up on the inside. And this is when he figures out about the notes, because he rolls up a piece of paper, passes through it, and it clicks in his head that these kids were passing notes because they had these pieces of paper that they had found before.
Right.
And so he puts one and one together, and he's like, okay, this is what this means. And it cuts like immediately after him having that revelation to the 2015 timeline where he's sharing that information with Roland.
Right.
And so, yeah, so he's going over that with Roland and talking about, you know, the cause there. We had a weird scene with Roland and him in 2015 because Roland got to see like the true scope of Wayne's dementia. Because, like, Wayne kind of, like, left the room and came back and was like, oh, Roland, what are you doing here? Like, completely lost all
he was
track.
He was complete. You can tell, like, he comes out of the bathroom and he's completely surprised. And you can even, like, see in his eyes that he's surprised and he's confused and he wasn't even sure where he was.
Yeah. And so, like, this is the first time Roland really gets to see that for himself.
He had just been talking to Roland like normal a few moments ago. Now he's surprised to see him.
Yeah. So Roland's like, okay, he's taking this and he just kind of plays along so as not to, like, you know, cause a rift or something.
And you can also see, like, Wayne kind of like tries to hide it and play it off, you know, that things wrong. Like when Wayne kind of realizes and he just like kind of like tries to play it off like, oh, that's not what happened, you know, and then he asks Roland if Roland sees a black sedan down the street.
Which Roland doesn't.
Yeah, which we know, like, the past couple episodes, there's always that scene where Wayne's being haunted by ghosts of the past, and then he looks out the window and there's this black sedan. And Roland says he doesn't see it. We don't get to see what Roland sees out the window. It doesn't like switch to his point of view. So Roland just turns around and says he doesn't see it. So we wonder if, like, so there's like a question, is he lying to just because he thinks he thinks it'll help Wayne, or, you know, is he being truthful? And is the black sedan something that Wayne is just seeing as part of his dementia?
Yeah, we don't know. We still don't know the answer to that. Another weird scene we had was in the 1990s, Amelia, Wayne's wife, doing a reading for her book.
Yeah.
And she's talking about the case, and she's doing like a Q&A section afterwards, and she's getting a few softball questions at first, and then one guy stands up and just starts going off on her.
Yeah.
About how she's just trying to profit off of the pain of others. We see that he's got, you know, the one dead eye. I thought originally that this was the original guy that we'd seen before, that they had interrogated.
I thought it was.
But I've like was looking at other people's impressions or something, people talking about the episode, and people were saying it wasn't. So I don't know if it was or wasn't. I was pretty sure it was.
I think it was, because what significance would it have otherwise? You know?
That the other guy was just a red herring, and that this guy is the actual one.
Actually, you know what? I think they got a point, because because Amelia immediately, like, after she leaves, she says something to herself, like, about the dolls, you know?
Yeah.
And there was, according to the lady that they interrogate, there was a black man with like a dead eye who bought a bunch of those dolls from her.
And there was also the reports of a black man and a white woman in was it a brown sedan or something?
Yeah.
So there's like these other kind of elements of that we don't really have clarified yet. But anyways, whether this guy is or isn't the guy that we'd seen before, it still has the same implication in this actual scene that he is, that whoever this person is somehow connected to this case, is this person that was suspected of buying these dolls.
Yeah.
So we got that. Another big thing we had in this episode was Dan.
Uncle Dan trying to extort the cops for money in exchange for information he says he has.
So I have a theory about this. This is in the 1990 timeline, and what he wants is $7,000.
Yeah.
Robert Rodriguez made his first movie El Mariachi for $7,000 in the 1990s. Coincidence? Yes.
Oh man. Yes. Yes. You blew it wide open. I knew it was Robert Rodriguez all along.
Yes. But anyways, so he wants $7,000 from a police officer. He's telling them that them looking into Tom is all wrong, that, you know, he's not a friend to Tom. He's not on good terms with Tom. He doesn't give a shit about Tom. But he's telling them that what they're looking into is they're just looking completely in the wrong direction.
And he says he knows. He says he knows who's involved, and he says, like, you know, the people who are actually involved or who are actually looking for Julie are so way ahead of the cops that they don't even know.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, you know, like, Wayne and Roland are thinking, like, you know, he's full of shit, right? Because, you know, he's asking for $7,000 for so-called information that they don't even know is good, you know?
Yeah.
Like, in their back of their mind, they gotta be thinking, you know, they hand him this money, he's gonna give them some bullshit lead that goes nowhere, and he's gonna run off with it.
He makes an interesting implication, though, which is that the death of his sister, Lucy, was
that
tied to these people as well.
Yeah, he says that wasn't just an overdose, that was manufactured.
Yes. So that makes it kind of a little interesting because it's like, oh, okay, so this is something that already wasn't necessarily sitting well with them, and making a connection to that kind of gives a little bit more credence. They try to kind of, put the screws to him, I guess, and get him to reveal stuff without paying money, but he said he's used to being beaten up or something.
Yeah, he says it doesn't matter what they do to him. He's not giving up what he knows without them paying up. And so basically he puts a lot of pressure on Wayne and Roland to get $7,000 together. Of course, Wayne and Roland, they go to their superiors about this. In the meantime, Tom is let go because since they didn't have any, evidence against Tom to arrest him, they could only hold him for 24 hours. 24 hours was up, so they had to release him. And Tom, instead of just leaving, he kind of wanders around the department, and starts eavesdropping to see what he can find out. And he overhears these two officers who are discussing, apparently, who are discussing Uncle Dan and the deal he was offering Roland and Wayne, They're just casually discussing it between themselves, and Tom happens to overhear this discussion,
So we get to see Tom kind of a little bit out of character, being very violent.
Oh yeah,
in his pursuit of his brother-in-law.
Well, Tom is not in a good state emotionally. He hasn't been this entire season, but he is not emotionally in a very good place. And now he is of the belief that Dan has information about his daughter that he's trying to blackmail the police for. And so Tom is like, if Dan knows some shit, then he's gonna get that information. He's gonna beat the shit out of him if he has to get that information.
Which is very uncharacteristic of Tom, and it also goes along with what they've been setting up this whole episode, implying not only that he's gay, but that he's somehow by being gay, he's less threatening or something.
Right.
And oh yeah, he's not somebody to worry about or something like that. And, including Dan himself basically implying that Tom's not a threat to him or anything. And that kind of turns not to be the case for it, because Tom gets Dan and just beats the shit out of him to get the information that he wants. Dan says he doesn't actually have as much information as he implied he did. He just has a name. And he said, and that name shows some involvement that just he has figured out, put some puzzle pieces together.
Yeah. So Tom manages to get the name from Dan.
We don't see the scene where we actually hear who the name is. We just see immediately after that Tom kind of cruising around.
Well, we see Tom kind of, he cruises around and he stops off at Hoyt Food,
Yeah, it looks like he's been drinking.
It looks like he's been drinking, and we know he's obviously there because of what Dan told him. He didn't just randomly decide to go to this place. Because he's been drinking. He's got his gun, he breaks in. He's there to do damage, or to find whatever the hell he thinks he's gonna find there.
He finds this long hallway that looks kind of like dungeon-esque.
Now we know that, and you're wondering, how is he able to just break in here without knowing anybody? Well, we know that somebody's watching him, because briefly somebody watching him over a security camera. And there's not really a sense of urgency to this person, right? They're just
kind of casually watching, and then But he's going down this long dungeon looking kind of hallway. It's creepy kind of looking hallway, and then he opens up the door, and at this point as I'm watching, I'm like, oh shit, it's gonna be a pink room.
Yeah, well,
because we've been hearing about the princess of the pink room.
That's another scene, because we also had a scene with Amelia, interviewing a girl at this orphanage, I guess. I don't know if orphanage for lack of a better term, where Julie apparently stayed.
Like a women's shelter, I think.
Yeah, like a women's shelter, I guess, where Julie had previously stayed, and we got more information, like this girl that Amelia's interviewing says Julia called herself the princess of the pink, room or something, which is the same thing. Like the one guy told Roland and Wayne.
Yeah, we'd also seen the one scene where who we think was Julie was calling about her father being on the news, asking her to contact him or something, and she had mentioned something about a pink room as well.
Yeah, so we know a pink room is significant, and that's what Tom finds.
Yeah, and the episode just ends with him. He turns on the light, the room's like this bright hot pink, and we don't see what he's looking at, but we see him approaching, and he says like, "What the hell, Julie?"
And just when he says that, we see Harris James come up behind him. And again, so we know Harris James is involved now. For 100% sure.
And we know he disappears.
And we
also know that the uncle had disappeared and turned up dead in 2015.
We also find out this episode that Tom is dead in 2015. Because the woman there who's doing the documentary, she mentions it to Wayne when they're talking.
Yes. So we know there's like a chain of death here that's just occurred, basically.
That's just occurred. Yeah, exactly. Because interestingly enough, it seems like, I'm assuming interestingly enough, it looks like Tom actually gets killed before Dan does. But we know that Dan does end up dead after this, especially,
well, for all we know, Tom could have killed Dan already.
I don't think he did.
We just don't know.
Yeah, I don't think that wasn't the implication.
They're being kind of vague with the way they're showing things. And
yeah, well, they've been vague with the way they've been showing things since the start. So it's
yeah. They're very cautiously releasing information to us.
But we're starting to see how things went down, you know?
Yes. So all these kind of people that disappeared or are either found dead or suspected to be dead or something, like they're all kind of like linked to this events at the end of this episode, apparently.
Yeah, apparently.
So that's the end of the episode. It was an exciting, like, oh my god, kind of crazy moment right at the end there. Finally see the pink room and it's creepy as shit. And you got this guy, Harris James. Now we know for sure somebody that is involved in this.
Yes.
In some capacity. So yeah, you got like lots of interesting stuff going on right there. And then when it shows the scenes from next week, it mentions 2 episodes left.
Yep.
So we're right at the end. We have answers coming.
Yeah, the answers are coming. They're going to come fast and hard. So look forward to that.
The next 2 episodes should be pretty good.
In fact, tomorrow evening is the next episode. So I'm excited.
Yes, it should be good. That kind of brings us to an end, though, of True Detective.
Yeah, that concludes True Detective.
For this episode, at least. For this podcast.
We still got 2 more episodes to discuss.
Yeah. But let's start talking about The Magicians. We're going to be talking about Season 4, Episode 4, Marry, Fuck, Kill.
I love this. I love this episode because it's a Josh-centered episode. Like, how many Josh-centered episodes do you have in the series? Absolutely none until this episode.
So we'll save most of that for the end because it's the majority of the actual content of the episode.
Right.
But we can cover some of the other stuff first. So I think let's start off with Alice's abductor from the last episode.
Yeah, it's
kind of a surprise. Yeah.
It's kind of surprise. I wasn't expecting to see him again. And
Christopher Plover, the infamous child molester, their first suspect for who the Beast was.
The author of the Fillory books.
Yes. And the guy that basically created the Beast and was first suspected to be the Beast. Like that's who they thought was the Beast about halfway through the first season.
Yeah, until
before they ended up finding out that it was actually his victim that became the Beast.
Yeah, it was actually one of the boys.
Martin Chatwin,
yeah, who is actually the Beast.
But Christopher Plover, the child molesting author of Fillory, and that's who ended up kind of abducting Alice. He says that he wants to find a place where he can have peace. Yeah. Alice isn't quite sold on that. Is like, what, you want your paradise, like a place full of little boys or something? And he's like, no, even I know that that's wrong. I've had time. I was tortured for years.
Well, Alice is for obvious reasons disgusted by this man. She doesn't want to help him, but at the same time, he's got her in a corner because she needs him. Because the books she's looking for of her and her friends, they're all in, I guess, they called it the editing room, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Because their stories are still being written. And so she has to get into the editing room and get the books before everybody's endings are written.
He also proposes a spell that he knows that can rewrite, like leave a fake trail.
Yes.
And they actually make a little Netflix joke, which is kind of funny.
Yeah.
Where he said, like, he has a spell where he feeds the spell premise and then it just starts writing it on its own.
Oh yeah, and then Al says, well, that explains Netflix.
Yeah. So that seems to kind of be their plan, but we don't really get past that point. The kind of storyline with Alice ends this episode when she
grabs the books.
Yeah, she grabs the books and she hasn't done anything to use the spell yet. But she's looking at Quentin's book.
He says Quentin's story ends with him dying, and Christopher says, "Isn't that how all stories end?" And she's like, "But this is next week."
Yeah. So that's the Alice storyline this week. It was a surprise to see Christopher Plover again. Didn't think we'd see him again, but otherwise, kind of not that big of a story.
We have a interesting scene with Quentin and the monster who took over Elliot's body, where
we should start off where this begins, which is what we find out that the phone call that he was dreading in the last episode that came from the bad luck was indeed informing him that his father had died.
Yeah.
So he goes and he has to kind of like sort his father's stuff and get it out of there.
He has a conversation with his mother early about, she tells him he's got to sort stuff out and basically get rid of it.
Yeah. And he's going through this process when not Elliot just appears and is like, okay, well, let's get out of here now. And he's like, no, he's like, I'm doing this. And Elliot doesn't understand. And Quentin tries to explain, but he's just kind of not in the mood to like go into detail and explain.
Tries to explain the concept of grief.
Yes.
But like this creature doesn't understand human emotions. And instead of trying to like understand, he just decides that he finds it amusing and that he's just going to watch Elliot, and
and he actually kind of like gets through to Quentin in a way because he says like, Quentin's talking about being careful with these boats and he has to move them or something and he doesn't want to break them or something. And because if he breaks them, then he can't get rid of them or something. And then Elliot's like, well, then why don't you just break them yourself?
Yeah. And
this leads to a bit of a moment of catharsis for Quentin where he just starts destroying all of these model boats that his father has. Model airplanes.
Well, they both start destroying them together, right?
Yeah.
And then,
this leads not Elliot to a wrong conclusion.
Yeah, this leads him to a wrong conclusion. And also like his conclusion was like,
oh, well, if Quentin learns that somebody he cares about dies, all he has to do is break some stuff to get over it.
Yeah.
So now I'll tell him that, in fact, that Elliot is dead.
Yeah.
And is completely unable to read the look on Quentin's face at the delivery of this information and what that means.
Yeah, exactly. He just tells him that because he's like, okay, so I'll tell you that Elliot's dead so you can get over that too.
Like, go ahead and break some more stuff and then we'll go.
Yeah.
Just like, like, just like no care.
Yeah. And interesting scene.
Yeah, and you can see so much written on Quentin's face at that reveal.
Of course, right after that scene, we find out that Elliot is, in fact, not dead. Like the creature believes, but that he is kind of lost somewhere.
He's like trapped in his own head.
In his own head.
Yeah. So that's going to be kind of like a plot point next episode, I assume.
Yeah, I assume for next week, because that's where the episode ends.
Yes.
And
let's go into Julia's storyline, because Julia's got the last storyline before we go into the big Josh-centric story.
Yeah. So Julia knows that she's still a goddess, right? That she can't die, but she doesn't have like any magical power. She can't do magic, and so she's kind of asking, okay, why am I a goddess and I can't do magic? And basically she starts wondering, is there a way to fix that?
Yeah, she wants somebody that she can talk to about that information. Josh ends up hinting to her that she could go and talk to Bacchus's old followers.
Yeah,
who are still in Fillory.
Of course, the only problem is, like, as soon as Josh murdered Bacchus, the Maenads started killing themselves because they had nothing to live for.
Yeah. So Julia travels there along with this version of Penny, who's in love with her. And that plays into the storyline here because they go there and they basically stop, Bacchus's, like, last remaining follower from killing herself.
Yes. In the process of doing it when they find her.
Yeah. She's, like, literally putting a noose around her neck.
Yeah, yeah.
And so they stop her and they convince her to kind of take a look at Julia, and she's like, oh, all I got is inconclusive. She's like, we need to do this one ritual to kind of figure things out. And she's like, but the problem is I can't do it because I don't believe in you.
Well, first she's like, but it's kind of an intimate, it's an intimate thing. And she's like, well, okay. And she's like, no, you don't get it. I can't do it. I don't believe in you. It has to be somebody who believes in you, somebody who worships you.
Cut to Penny.
Yeah.
Looking uncomfortable in that moment where it's like, okay, well, he kind of has to, like, at that point, he kind of has to reveal what everybody already knows are his feelings, but he has to say it out loud, which isn't exactly a comfortable thing to do.
Right, exactly.
Of like, okay, well, I can do it, I guess. And so they have to do this, like, intimate ritual where she's, like, naked and he's, like, putting oil on her and stuff and feeling her up.
And he has to touch her boobies, and he is, like, so nervous about it too, because he's like, can I? And Julia's like, touch my boobies, and he's like, yeah, and she's like, yeah, you can touch my boobies.
So they go through this ritual, and finally Bacchus's last follower, when they get the results of it, is like, you really were a goddess, you weren't shitting with me. And she's like, yeah, but I don't have any power. And she said, what are you talking about? You don't have power. There's, like, power pouring off of you. The implication being here is that Julia does have power. She just can't use magic for some reason.
Yeah, she can't access it or access magic.
Yeah, but she does have power, And so,
which we knew because she couldn't be killed.
Yes. And so now Julia has a follower.
Maynard decides that she's gonna follow Julia now.
Mm-hmm. As her new goddess to worship.
Her new goddess to worship.
And that takes us into our last storyline here, which is the kind of bigger central storyline. Is that
awakening?
Yeah, there can be only one. Josh, we had seen in the last season, we had the one episode where they had gone to the 23rd reality.
Yeah.
And had encountered a different version of Josh. That's, of course, also where the version that we have in this season of both Marina and Penny come from this dimension as well, or from this reality as well. Right. But we also had in this reality a different version of Josh, who was kind of slick and, like, wasn't like a total oaf, like, or doofus, I guess. Like,
geek, but he was also like a major asshole in that reality. Like a backstabbing asshole.
Yeah, but he was also, like, really haunted too. Like, he had seriously had troubles, and so when he encountered the Josh that we know, he kept telling him, there's some bad stuff coming for you.
Right.
And we knew that Josh was infected with this, like, werewolf disease, this curse.
Yeah.
And so now we're kind of, that catches up to us. We first get it because there's a moment when Josh wakes up and there's, like, a dead animal in his bed with him.
Well, you skip the scene because we see it when Josh has a nightmare where he turns into a wolf and he murders Margot, and then when he wakes up, there's a dead animal in his bed next to him.
Yes. And so we kind of get into the rules. He ends up talking to a teacher at Breakbills that he had, a cryptozoologist.
Well, this is where he got it from because
yes,
he got that. This is lycanthropy in the magicians is a sexually transmitted disease. So because people with lycanthropy, when the quickening comes, they have to do one of three things. They have to fuck or murder, and if they can't fuck somebody or murder somebody, they're gonna murder themselves.
Yes. Well, they can't just fuck, they have to fuck somebody who doesn't have the disease.
Yes, it has to be somebody uninfected, because obviously the disease wants to spread. So,
Yeah.
and so we find out like Josh contracted it from this professor at Break Bills, and we find out the only reason she had sex with him in the first place was because she had to pass it on to somebody who was uninfected. And Josh,
we find out from her that she's kind of a horrible person, that she has no qualms about spreading the disease around and then just forgetting about it.
And just forget. In fact, she plays it off to Josh like it wasn't even like a big deal that she did that. You know?
Yeah, she says like, oh, you could just, swipe right on somebody and
you could just
pass it on.
You just pass it on yourself. And Josh is not that kind of an amoral jackass. Josh doesn't want to pass it on. He
doesn't want to pass it on to somebody. He doesn't want to kill somebody.
Yeah, he doesn't want to kill somebody. He doesn't want to do anything amoral.
He's kind of resolved to the idea that, he's going to end up having to rip his own guts out.
Yeah, that he's just gonna have to let this thing kill him. And
Margot's kind of the one that's kind of pushing him towards looking at other options because she doesn't want to lose another friend. She's really upset about what's happening with Elliot.
Yeah, Margot's really upset about Elliot. So Margot in this mindset is kind of like she's not going to lose another friend.
They end up doing something really smart here, which is that they go into the idea of this fake reality that had existed at the beginning of the season, and the fact that Josh, as somebody else, had sex with somebody else.
Yeah, because Josh, like Margot's questioning Josh, and Josh is like, I wouldn't have sex with anybody, like without telling them about this first. And then he's like, but my alter ego wouldn't it have known to say anything,
Yeah. And then she's like, so did you have sex? He said one.
Yeah.
There's one person. And he goes to visit a woman and he's trying to, of course we have to remember now that he doesn't have the same appearance that he did when he had this, they had not just a different identity, but a complete different appearance.
Yeah. So he's claiming to be a friend of this other version of himself that this woman had sex with. And he's trying to tell her, but like, she's just a normal person, so he can't.
She's not going to understand the magic aspect.
He's not going to understand, so he can't like just come out and tell her. So he's trying to like kind of dance around it, and be like, well, you got something, and she's like, wait, herpes? She's thinking like herpes, and he's kind of like, yeah. Do you have these symptoms? And he's listing off these symptoms. And she gets upset, and then finally it seems like he gets through to her, and she reaches like an understanding, and then that's when Josh discovers she had already brutally murdered somebody.
Yeah, she'd like taken a guy to her bed and just ripped him to pieces.
And so that's when Josh bails because, obviously she's been through her quickening. She's good now. So we don't have to, Josh was a little too late to stop her from doing anything.
Yeah. So it's, of course, that's a little short-sighted because she'll have other quickenings,
Right.
If they come. At that point, he's lost his urgency on that, and he's also now feeling supreme guilt because basically this body's on him.
Yeah, he's feeling supreme guilt, but now the urgency is back on himself, and Margot decides that, they're gonna find a cure.
There's nothing to find, though.
It involves a Komodo dragon's heart, which Kanye West apparently has a Komodo dragon in an apartment, conveniently enough.
This ends up to just, there is nothing. There's nothing they can do.
Yeah, it ends up doing nothing. Josh eats it and it does nothing. And, so Josh runs out into the woods and he humps a tree, just while the urges for a while longer. But he ultimately decides that he's gonna lock himself up in a cage and break bills and just wait for the urges to compel him to rip his own guts out.
Yeah, he's just gonna sacrifice himself. Margot can't take this. She puts herself in the cage, locks the thing, and throws the keys away so that now she's stuck in the cage with him.
Yeah.
And it's like a magic-proof cage, so neither can get out.
Yes.
And so, like, Josh is like, what are you doing? I don't know what I'm gonna do to you. And he's not wanting to pass on, and she's saying, I'll take on this curse. I just don't want to lose another friend. I can't lose somebody else close.
Right.
So they fuck.
Yes.
So they fuck and they kind of have like a little sweet moment afterwards where they're just kind of laying together there as he's very thankful that she helped him with the curse. And they talk about what's going on, and he mentions Elliot and how hard it's been for her with him. And you see kind of like the emotion on her face, and like there's tears starting to come down her face as she's holding things together because she just doesn't want to lose any more friends.
Right.
This is, of course, like right before the scene we'd already mentioned where we find out that Elliot is in fact still alive inside of not Elliot inside of his body somewhere in his head.
Yeah. So we know, like, not Elliot claims that Elliot's dead. Well, I think it's more like he thinks it, because he says he felt Elliot's soul just die. But we know that we see that Elliot's not actually dead.
Not Elliot kind of moves around on instinct. Like, he's not really knowledgeable. He doesn't understand even himself because of whatever the gods took from him.
Yeah, he does. In fact, it's interesting too, because he's really mopey this episode, right? Like he's killed Bacchus, and now he's kind of like just mopey.
Brooding.
And there's even one point at the end where Josh is like, why is he depressed? He got what he wanted,
Yeah. But yeah, he's still not finding what he needs. And, so it looks like the next storyline that's going to jump into right now, what we're hinting at for next week probably, is going to be focused on the Elliot that's still inside of his head.
So we might get an Elliot episode next week.
Which will be nice because we haven't seen actual Elliot in
this entire season. So it'll be good to actually see Elliot again.
Yeah. But that's it for The Magicians this week. We'll talk about that as well as True Detective next week as well. But until then, here's what's coming up in the week ahead. We're recording this on Saturday, February 16th. But on Friday, which is when we start what shows are coming up, February 15th, The Umbrella Academy hit Netflix. I've watched like an episode and a half of it. It's pretty good. I'm enjoying it so far.
I haven't watched it yet.
It's definitely polished. You know what it kind of feels like? I was struck by is, God, who's that director who did like the Royal Tenenbaums and stuff?
Oh, Wes Anderson?
Yeah. It feels like if Wes Anderson made the X-Men.
Yeah, that's actually like what the comic kind of struck me as too.
So it kind of has that feeling to it. So.
The Umbrella Academy always came across as the Royal Tenenbaums. Yeah, what you described, Royal Tenenbaums if it was like X-Men.
Yeah. It's pretty good. I was also kind of surprised. I'd found out like I think just before, like a couple days ago, that one of the guys in the Umbrella Academy is Robert Sheenan, who's in a British show called Misfits.
Oh yeah, I've heard of Misfits.
So it was cool to see him again. I haven't seen him in anything in a while. But yeah, so it looks pretty good. I've seen the first episode was really good. Second episode, I was tired and I was half asleep when I was watching it. I'm like, I need to save this till when I'm actually awake enough to watch.
Right.
So I'm going to watch some more of that. Proven Innocent came to Fox. Kind of just another slight twist on a basic police procedural or legal procedural, I guess. Another show, though, that came out on Friday was Doom Patrol, which came to DC Universe.
I saw the trailer and that actually looked pretty decent.
Well, here's the thing is that they just put out that trailer like a day before the show came out.
Oh, really?
And before that, we'd only had like teases. So we hadn't had anything that actually really showed what the show was like until just then. So that was kind of crazy because it was like, oh wow, like they really held off to the very end. And then I watched the teaser or the trailer and I was like, wow, this actually looks really good.
Yeah, it looks a lot better than like Titans look.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, I also found out that it's coming out week to week, so I'm going to hold off.
Yeah.
But this might be like, once I find out that the finale aired, this might be the point that I subscribe to DC Universe.
Probably,
at least for the free trial.
Probably easier to get people to stay subscribed to these services if they put shows out week to week.
Yeah, maybe. But then you have cases like me who like I would have probably subscribed even without a free trial just for like a month. But
right.
When it's week to week, I'm just gonna wait until it's over before I do that.
Right, exactly.
So, there's some other stuff to check out on DC Universe as well.
Got spoiled by Netflix season dumps.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if there was more stuff on DC Universe to watch, that would be one thing. But there's like 2 other originals.
Yeah.
One of of which I have no interest in, Titans, and the other one being, Young Justice, which I like, but I'm not like in any hurry to watch. So I'm just like, I'll wait either till it's done, like with its first season, or until like, maybe Swamp Thing's done with its first season, so I can actually watch a few shows back to back. But yeah, until then, if you do have DC Universe, or if you're just like a big comics fan and you read a lot of DC Comics, DC Universe comes also with like a subscription to read all the comic books too. So it's useful if you're into that. But Doom Patrol looks really good. Today, Ransom returned to CBS. Another procedural. Tomorrow on February 17th, Last Week Tonight with John Oliver returns to HBO.
Oh, goody.
Tuesday, February 19th, 2019, At Home with Amy Sedaris comes back to True TV. Do you know who Amy Sedaris is?
Strangers with Candy?
Yes.
Okay.
So this is like basically Amy Sedaris doing like a Martha Stewart style show, but it's like fake.
Oh, so that should be funny.
Yeah. On Wednesday, February 20th, Documentary Now returns to IFC and Survivor returns to CBS. Then on Thursday, February 21st, Flack comes to Pop and The Oath comes to Crackle. And lastly, next Friday, February 22nd, lots of Netflix shows, Chef's Table, Go Viva et tu Manaru, I probably pronounced that horribly, Rebellion, Subura, and Working Moms, all coming to Netflix. Nothing necessarily that's, on my radar. But that's what's coming up in the week ahead.
All right.
So, until then, next week we're going to be talking about True Detective and the Magicians. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Tyson Gifford. You can follow Will. He is at Voxel Hero. You can check out our Facebook page and our YouTube channel, as well as our site, thetotalscreen.com. You can subscribe to this podcast through any major podcast client like iTunes or Pocket Cast, and the entire backlog of our podcast is available on our YouTube channel. So thank you everybody for listening. Good night.
Good night.
If you would like to reach out to us and make a comment, send an email to contact@thetotalscreen.com. Stay tuned to The Total Screen for the very best